welcome. Here we are once again at the bunker, on location at the forest, reading Our Father Cares. I'm glad you're willing to join me today. We are reading July 31st reading, Hitherto hath the Lord helped us. I am glad that you are here. I hope you had a good Independence Day. I hope that you considered the huge benefit it is to live in this nation that has given so much freedom to so many for so long. And those freedoms are threatened. There have been, well, actually over the years, been chipped away at by those who would rather control their fellow men than to have freedom and to allow their fellows to have freedom. And I'm thankful for the opportunity that we've been given. I want to use it, what opportunity there is to further the kingdom of God. I know the world's not very long yet, and before its demise, the second coming is at hand, the end of the world. You look around and you can see the turmoil, disintegration of things. Anyway, regardless of how long it may be, we're told that oh, boy, got something in there. Anyway, we're told that we ought to live in a state of expectancy. If we thought that it was 100 years from now, we probably wouldn't live the lives we should live. But if we saw the evil in the world, and there's plenty of it, and we thought Christ might be coming this year or this month, or, who knows, even in 5 years, we probably have a lot different. My goodness. Got something in there, didn't it? Boy, my dad. Several years back, my dad had a cough like that, lingered after he was sick from something, right? Bug going around. He got well and was fine, but the cough persisted for several months. We were talking on the phone. He asked me if there was anything I thought might help. Of course, I'd been studying herbs, and so, I had books to look into. I didn't know off the top of my head. So I said, let me look. And I pulled out a book or two and started looking stuff up, suggested this and that, and whatever. And none of it was anything he had on hand. And, well, maybe there was one thing, I don't know. Anyway, then I mentioned stinging nettle. And he said, oh, I've got that growing down by the creek. And it was wintertime, or at least fall, and it had already turned brown dye. He said, you think it'd still work? I'm like, oh yeah, of course it will. I mean, it's just dried out there. You'd have dried it anyway. You might have to use a little more of it, but I'm sure that would work. So he went down to the creek and pulled up the whole plant, shook off the dirt, ground that thing up. I don't know if he put it in a blender. I think he did. And then he poured it in some glass pitcher or something, poured boiling water over it, steeped it, drank that stuff. I believe he said he coughed one more time after he drank that. And he drank it, I don't know how many, 2 or 3 cups a day, probably for maybe several weeks, I don't know, a month maybe, I don't know. Anyway, I'm a real believer in that stuff. And it probably grows down here. That leaf right there looks a little bit like it. Hey, down here by the water, that might be a stand of it right there. Go over there and look at it more closely. But anyway, amazing stuff. God's provided remedies for the ills of man and the plants that grow. And the world, don't be deceived. The people out there that you hear speaking on the news and in all the official capacities, they're by and large worldlings. And the world is by and large not following God. And they're going to say, oh, that stuff doesn't work. That's just an old wives' tale. Well, I can tell you, it does work. I've had experience with it, and it's marvelous. And I think that if we all knew about that sort of thing, we would feel really good. And I think that is marvelous. All right, well, I've digressed. I hope that's something that you've benefited from. Talking about that, I don't know if you've heard about some of that stuff or not. If you haven't, books are better than internet sources. I mean, there's good information on the internet, but it's hard to sift. Books are the same way. They're good ones and bad ones, but I'm going to give you a title or two. Back to Eden by Jethro Kloss is excellent. I love that book. I really liked that when I found it. That one's easy to find. Amazon has it. You can get the small mass paperback for I think $6. Another one that's great is written by an Austrian woman, Maria Treben. She actually has a couple of books. I have two of them. She might have more. One of them is Health Through God's Pharmacy, and what's the other one? I don't remember the other one off the top of my head. Anyway, she's got two books. They're kind of thin and they're big format, like close to 8.5 by 11. And those are marvelous. Those are excellent. There's a book online that you can look at the whole thing online, and it's not as good as those two, but it's still fairly good, I'd say. Well, I say that I've got the print copy of it, and I've got useful information out of it. If I just had that book, I'm not sure if it would really give me the info I needed. Because some of them really don't. But anyway, M. Greaves, I think her name was, what was her first name? I don't know. Anyway, A Modern Herbal. That one's, you can find that online. You don't have to buy anything, download anything. That's pretty nice. But Jethro Kloss, get Kloss's book. That's the way to go. Anyway, if you haven't heard about that stuff, it's marvelous. Okay, hitherto hath the Lord helped us. Psalm 105, 1 and 2. O give thanks unto the Lord, call upon his name, make known his deeds among the people. Sing unto him, sing psalms unto him, talk ye of all his wondrous works. Like the nettle that he's made for us that'll stop coughs. According to the books I've read, it's antiviral, antifungal, antibacterial, anti-inflammatory. It's a good source of iron. This stuff is amazing. Just make a tea out of it, drink that stuff down. We've got a lot of brown recluse spiders around here. You get stung by one of those, you get medical treatment. It doesn't go well. Sometimes people have them reopening and just, being problems for a year, more sometimes. Plantain. Not the banana, but there's a weed probably in your yard. If you haven't sprayed it too much, very likely you have plantain. It's also called ribwort. It's got kind of oval-shaped leaves with distinct ribs radiating from the center, and then it's got a stalk comes up with little seeds. There's also a narrow leaf version, and you can chew that and then just apply that as a plaster right to that bite. And poultice, do that repeatedly, and you can draw that out and get rid of the poison. It works for bee stings and all that sort of thing. I think it works for snake bites, although I've never had to try that. So anyway, God's provided wondrous works. The dealings of God with his people should be often repeated. Boy, I was on a trip once. Well, our church youth group, Pathfinders, like Boy Scouts with boys and girls. I was one of the adults in charge of our local club, and we were going down to another state to get together with some other clubs. And I didn't want to go on the bus with everybody else because my brother lived near where we were going, and I wanted to be able to go over there and see him, so I drove my car. I left a little bit after they did. There was the bus with all the kids. Some of the other adults were coming with a pickup with a trailer of some supplies, and then I was driving myself. So I'm driving down there. I'm going across the state line, and there's a rest area there. And the Lord just said to me, "You need to stop there." And I don't want to stop. I need to get down there. It's like, they have free maps. You like maps. I'm like, okay, I'll stop. So I go and stop. The buses stopped there, and they couldn't figure out, I can't remember where they were going. That's what it was. They're trying to figure out where they were going. And I went inside to the rest area, and I talked to the lady that was there, and I said, "We're trying to get to such and such a place. Can you help us?" And she looked it up on her computer, and she printed out a map and pointed just where we were and everything, and I took that out to them, and I said, "Here you go." I mean, they had their phones, and they were trying to figure it out, and they were having some trouble. And so it's not that I was wiser than anybody that was with the bus. It's just that, I don't know, they weren't thinking down the right channel. So God used me to provide that help. And that trip had probably half a dozen similar kind of things. I can't remember them all now necessarily. The hitch broke on the truck, but they were already at the campsite, and I was able to take it over to my brother's house and weld it back, fix it, and it was fine. And the brakes. What was it? It was one of the airlines. I guess it was for the air brakes and also the suspension that sprung a leak, had a problem. That happened just outside of a church college there. We knew people. We were able to pull off there and get it repaired, and had the kids spent some time in the gym, played some basketball, ate their lunch. There were several other things like that. God is willing to help us if we're willing to let Him. So let's recognize His dealings with us and encourage each other. The dealings of God with His people should be often repeated. How frequently were the waymarks set up by the Lord in His dealings with ancient Israel? Lest they should forget the history of the past, He commanded Moses to frame these events into song, that parents might teach them to their children. They were to gather up memorials and to lay them up in sight. Special pains were taken to preserve them, and when the children should inquire concerning these things, the whole story might be repeated. Thus the providential dealings and the marked goodness and mercy of God in His care and deliverance of His people were kept in mind. We are exhorted to call to remembrance the former days, in which after ye were illuminated ye endured a great fight of afflictions. Hebrews 10:32. For His people in this generation the Lord has wrought as a wonder-working God. We need often to recount God's goodness and to praise Him for His wonderful works. Let us not cast away our confidence, but have firm assurance, firmer than ever before. Hitherto hath the Lord helped us, and He will help us to the end. 1 Samuel 7:12. Let us look to the monumental pillars, reminders of what the Lord has done to comfort us and to save us from the hand of the destroyer. Let us keep fresh in our memory all the tender mercies that God has shown us, the tears He has wiped away, the pains He has soothed, the anxieties removed, the fears dispelled, the wants supplied, the blessings bestowed, thus strengthening ourselves for all that is before us through the remainder of our pilgrimage. We cannot but look forward to new perplexities in the coming conflict, but we may look on what is past as well as on what is to come and say, Hitherto hath the Lord helped us. As thy ways, so shall thy strength be. Deuteronomy 33:25. The trial will not exceed the strength that shall be given us to bear it. Then let us take up our work just where we find it, believing that, whatever may come, strength proportionate to the trial will be given. Amen.